he was about 3 years behind me, I think. And he studied props and set design at this tiny little liberal arts school that we both were at in Pennsylvania.
Very cool. And now
Yeah.
he's doing animatronics.
Now he's doing animatronics. In fact, so Rachel, you can close that window now. Yep. When we were looking at hiring an animatronics faculty member here and starting some coursework in that, he and I probably were on the phone for 3 or 4 hours, just sort of in a couple of meetings talking through like, well, what's important and what are you going to focus on and why that and what can we focus on? And
Yeah.
yes, it's interesting that he and I are the only two people who are starting anything like that right now, which is
Yeah.
wild.
It
But
is
don't
wild.
tell
I
him I
mean,
said this. I don't know.
it's
Say that
great to
again.
be on the it's good to be on the front end of it. You want to be on the front end of it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that he and I are actually doing very different things, right?
Yeah.
He's more on the artistry side, and the faculty member we hired here is really figure finishing.
Oh, nice.
We got buy-in from engineering and engineering technology to really dig deep into the sort of industrial robot part of it, right? The mechanics, the controls, that kind of thing. So, um, oh, Rachel is telling me to shut up because it's time to start. So, we'll get started. Yeah. We'll give a minute here there's like 62 attendees who have logged in. We're going to let them populate the room so we can just look awkwardly at each other through the cameras.
Stare into the abyss.
Mm-hmm. We'll edit this all out for, in post.
No problem.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. There's a good number of folks in the room. Welcome, everybody. My name is Rich Dione. I am the co-director of Purdue University's Fusion Studio for Entertainment and Engineering. We're here in the new Martinson Entertainment and Engineering Labs here at Purdue. You can see behind me some of the animatronic head skins, and there's a couple of lungs and a heart back there. We're going to be from here most of the time and let you see different parts of this room as it develops and evolves. More importantly, though, we're here with Logan Zawacki from Sally Dark Rides. I have Logan's bio here, but I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to him and say, Logan, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself before we dig into some of the meat of this conversation?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, Logan Zawacki from Sally Dark Rides. I'm a project manager. Just celebrated 9 years with Sally, which is pretty amazing. Loving every minute of it. My prior background to this, I have a BFA in graphic design, an MFA in photography, and an MBA in entrepreneurship and family business or family enterprise. So love lifelong learning. I never stop. I'm always searching for the next thing to learn, and that's really part of the thrill of working at Sally. Is every project is so unique that I'm learning so much on the job every single time we get a new client, a new IP, new project. It's pretty incredible.
That's awesome. And there's another whole conversation we could have about the opportunities that open up from having, say, an MBA in entrepreneurship and how that changes your perspective on things. But today we're here to talk about Sesame Street and the Sesame Street ride that you worked on in Europe. I will confess that I am a child of Sesame Street. I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s. If anybody knows me well enough to know this, my family is from Boston. I grew up in North Boston. Every one of my relatives has a thick Boston accent. And I used to get made fun of as a little kid because I never had one. And that's entirely from watching Sesame Street, from growing up and seeing people talk that sort of middle America dialect. So I have a huge soft spot in my heart for Sesame Street. To start with, could you just talk a little bit about your role on that project, how you got involved and what you did?
Absolutely. So, as the lead project manager for the Sesame Street Mission interactive 4D dark ride at PortAventura World, an hour south of Barcelona, Spain. So, with this project, I was brought on after contract is signed. I'm brought on to oversee every aspect of delivery from contract all the way to handover with client. So I coordinate with the client, I coordinate with the IP holder, the intellectual property holder, which in this case was Sesame Workshop, and then as well as my team and all of our subcontractors and vendors to make sure that everything is doing the best it can to stay on budget, on time, and delivers at the quality that everybody expects. And so that's one of the things Sally really harps on, is this idea of destination quality for regional parks. And so that's just one of our tenets that we focus on when we are working on new attractions. And so everything from, helping with budgeting, helping with scheduling. Scheduling is a major key part. Taking care of approvals as we're going back and forth between a client and IP holder, making sure in this case the brand authenticity was met at every single aspect of the attraction, from the script to the way the animatronic Muppets looked to the way the sets looked. Everything had to be as authentic as possible. And the story and the interactivities that were taking place also had to reflect the values of the Sesame Workshop brand, as well as the family-focused values of PortAventura World.
We've all experienced this where we get lost we've gone back. Logan, we lost you halfway through.
No way.
I was just commenting that you had a really appropriate face for being frozen. It wasn't like, or something. So
no.
Well,
I was
sort
on
of
a
pick
roll.
up where you
last
left
thing I
off there.
said?
That's on.
Well, I think that, the main thing that I think I was hitting at towards the end there was making sure that the attraction also met all the values of both brand managers. In this case, the value of the Sesame Workshop brand with their characters and their specific demographic and family focus, as well as PortAventura's values and brand focusing on family-oriented entertainment. And that was really the big draw for PortAventura to bring this attraction to their park, is they had a Sesame Street section, but they really needed a high quality interactive dark ride within their park, because they didn't have that at all within their park. So something truly unique to the park and something that brought more people to that land. And that's exactly what we hit on.
Sure. There's a lot of pieces there that we could talk about, not least the sort of 3 bits of on time, under budget, and quality control. And we'll get back to that. But if I didn't let myself fanboy for a minute and ask the question, did you get to interact with any of the characters at a site visit or prep for opening, or were you so far removed that wasn't part of your work?
That's the beauty of being the project manager in this case. Since I'm involved with every single aspect of the attraction, we had an amazing time. We got to not only communicate on the regular basis with Sesame Workshop and their amazing creative team, and of course PortAventura and their amazing creative and design development team. We got the opportunity to make it as authentic as possible. We got 2 huge opportunities. One, we got to hire Jim Henson's Creature Shop, which is, I mean, that's just like a dream come true for over 50% of the people here at Sally. They were freaking out when we were like, hey, so yeah, we just signed a new subcontractor. It's Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Pretty amazing. And what we found is really the only way to 100% represent these animated characters the way they're meant to be seen was we had to partner with Jim Henson to ensure that their creature shop could make the characters look just like they look on the show. And what was really great about that partnership is we worked with them to not only make them look as authentic as the characters on the show, but to also scale them up. So because these are animatronic figures, and because you can't have a character that's only this big in every scene, they just get lost in it. So there were certain scenes where we really had to scale up the characters, and then the scenic had to match that scale up. And so we worked hand in hand with Jim Henson's Creature Shop based out of New York to bring these characters to life in a scale that they hadn't previously been represented. The only character in our ride that is 100% authentic to scale is Big Bird, because he doesn't need to be any bigger. So
Sure, yeah.
yeah, so that worked out perfect there. But we have two animatronic Detective Grovers. We have Bert and Ernie. We've got Abby Cadabby, and then Big Bird, all represented in true form, just in scaled up versions of these characters. And so being able
Wow.
to work with them to create what we call like the skins, the outer exterior of the Muppet, but then the entire interior was done by our team in partnership. So there were a lot of great lessons learned back and forth as we were cooperatively working on these characters and having to learn how their basic mouth mechs work without a machine, without, with just a standard hand, and how they
Mhm.
fabricate those, the limitations to how they fabricate versus how we animate. So finding all those balances, and we got to go to the creature shop to see our
Wow.
characters in production, and then to review, and we had our mechs, so showing them how our mechs are going to fit inside and how we're going to be able to animate Big Bird's beak and Detective Grover's mouth. And then in addition to that, to also bring authenticity to the CGI media, we
Yeah.
got to actually hire the puppeteers to do a private video recording at Sesame Workshop where they acted out the scenes from the ride. So we have
Wow.
video that we can never share, but we have video
Sure.
of the Muppeteers, working with their characters. And so we're able to see exactly how the characters would do it if it was a standard sort of TV show format. And then our animators, Art Studios, now 1050, I believe, they were able to take that information and translate it effortlessly into the 3D CGI media that you see in the ride.
Wow.
And it's
Wow.
incredible. The animation's incredible. And fun fact, that was the first time that, because Sesame Workshop told us this, that was the first time that the actual actors have ever been filmed and their performances used as reference for any kind of CG version of the Muppet or the Sesame Street Muppets. So yeah,
Okay.
amazing.
That's wild.
Yeah, we
And
were shocked
and
too.
and right. And now I have a bunch of questions that I hadn't anticipated asking. Um, and I'll do that in just a minute, but I realize I was a little remiss in saying we will leave some time at the end for question and answer. And I'm saying this mostly because someone looks like they've raised their hand virtually in the attendee room. Um, the best way to do that is to throw some questions up into the Q&A panel. So if you've got questions, throw them up in the Q&A panel. We'll get to them if there's an appropriate moment, or we'll do that at the end before we let everybody go. So, but we do actually want to encourage you to ask questions. We want to make sure we tackle the things that you want to know about. So one of the things that I have heard, and this I hadn't thought about before you started talking, but one of the things that I've always heard from, in interviews of actors who've worked on set with the Muppets, that you really quickly lose any sense of the fact that it's not a real person, that you're interacting with a character, and so much of that has to be about the artistry of the puppeteer,
Yeah,
right? And the
absolutely.
movement and the responsiveness and the kinds of nuance that you can get in your hand and the mouth, right? And you sort of alluded to this, but how big of a challenge was that for your team, and sort of recreating that that sense of that they're a real character and not an animatronic? Because we've all seen animatronics, even the really good ones, sometimes are a little stilted, they feel a little stiff.
Yeah.
Was it easier because they were Muppets? Was it harder because they were Muppets and they were sort of unexpected things to capture? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little of both. So we had it, for instance, one of the big scenes in the queue for anybody who's never actually gone on YouTube or been to PortAventura World and experienced the Sesame Street mission. In the queue, you walk into Detective Grover's office. And so the first sort of introduction of this character in animatronic form, his door opens and he walks out onto this little balcony, and then he turns and faces the audience and talks to them. Then he turns and walks a little more, talks, walks a little more, talks, and then enters back into his office. So one of the big challenges there was really trying to create a motion of Detective Grover that looks like the character on the show. Because, one of the toughest things is the characters, like you mentioned, are so animated. They're so lifelike. They also are able to do very, very, very rapid motions. Like when
Mhm.
Grover's like, ah, and his arms are all flailing. Like there's a lot of things that are, uniquely puppet Muppet. And that is very difficult to do on a regular basis, 365 days a year, 10 hours a day for the park without having major maintenance repairs for just constantly flailing like that. So we had to create the characters in such a way that they still look and feel like the characters. And thankfully, because of the way the general hinge movements and honestly the simple body movements of the characters, other than, like I said, the flailing arms, but the simple body movements of the characters really, they lend themselves so well to
Mm.
that. And there's also a quality about their animation that, even though they are 100% believable as living things, there's also something about them where there's that, that sort of disconnect from reality enough with the way they look and the way they move, because again, they can do movements that humans can't do. So therefore, having them animated, we had more flexibility. There was
Mm.
less of with a human, it's hard to animate a human because everybody knows what a human looks and moves like, and when it's not looking or moving like a human. We had more flexibility with these characters because they are not human. So it actually worked in our favor in many ways, bringing them to life.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so I sort of alluded to this before. You mentioned the three sides of the iron triangle, right? Like time, cost, and quality. Um, uh, Without telling any tales out of school, right, and things that you don't want or are uncomfortable talking about, are there examples of challenges for this project that um, sparked some interesting conversations with the stakeholders and the teams about how to resolve um, something related to those three things, quality and cost or time?
Uh, let's see. Well, I think one of the biggest factors that became an issue when it came to time was the script. So we have a really unique situation here. We have a team of incredibly talented writers who know their characters and know how to write for a 2 to 5 demographic, as well as that will appeal to the whole family. Um, and they're incredibly talented at writing these TV shows or a short movie. Um, but when you're writing for a ride, you have to be really careful with dialogue, especially an interactive ride,
Mm.
because the focus is on the interactivity, it's on the environment, it's on the animation happening in front of you. And really, if you've done your job right, all of the visual cues, in addition to the music, they're going to basically give you the story. The dialogue is really
Mhm.
there to just help add further instruction and to just keep the story going forward. But even if you have a 35-second scene, you can't have 35 seconds of dialogue. you're
Right.
looking at most 10 seconds of dialogue at most, because really there's so much going on in that scene. You want to keep dialogue to a minimum. And as you have, if it's a 35-second scene and you have vehicles traveling in up to the screen, traveling out all within 35 seconds, you don't truly have 35 seconds of focused attention at the screen. So therefore, working with them to have a script that hit all the points, that worked well with everyone, that then when we had going from an English script to a Spanish translation and realizing that everything we timed out with English language, English and Spanish they're not the exact same when it comes to length. And so therefore we found some scenes were actually longer after they were recorded in Spanish. We had to do like multiple recordings where you would have the actor speak it like they would normally speak it, like it would be spoken on the show. Because again, you're talking to 2 to 5 year olds. So you're not talking to professor, you need time to process. So we had to do those. This is a regular take, and now do a slightly faster take. And that's how we were able to meet all the requirements of dialogue that had to stay within the ride. But there were, even after all that, after making the media, adding the actual voice recordings, cuts had to continuously be made. And so that was really one of
Mm.
those where finding that balance where we were learning from them what was absolutely necessary to keep in for the target demographic, and they were learning
Hmm.
from us that this isn't a TV show. We don't have the unlimited amount of time, and we really got to get straight to the point. What are the essential items that have to be said in each scene?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. And that's actually one of the things that I started thinking about or wondering about when I knew we were going to have this conversation about this ride is, Sesame Street Workshop and the Henson folks, they sort of, not even sort of, they did invent this very evidence-based approach to television formatting for that age group,
Yeah.
right? That engages kids from 2 to 5 years old and helps them learn in ways that no one had really thought about before. And it's
Yeah.
I don't know much about it, but I know enough to know it's very specific. There are very specific things you do. The timing matters, what you say when and how you say it matters. And it sounds like there was some interesting learning that happened in translating that to a different medium.
Yeah.
Was
And
that
there's
true as much in the scenery and the ride itself as the language, or was that really sort of just about the dialogue?
Well, it's one of those things too, where when you go back to who the actual demographic is, Sesame Workshop's demographic of all of their focus on the education side and their programming side is 2 to 5. That's their target demographic. But a theme park, the target demographic is the
Hmm.
entire age spectrum. Everybody is their target demographic, and especially at PortAventura, families are the target demographic. So, and we're not talking like just, mom, dad, 2 kids. We're talking, parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, like the whole range. So you needed to create a ride that would appeal to an 80-year-old and is gentle enough but still fun enough that an 80-year-old can ride it, and also gentle enough, fun enough, and simple enough that a 2 to 3-year-old, if they have the height requirement, can ride it. But even more importantly, it has to be fun and interactive and have the gameplay to target the teen audience. Because one of the big challenges with all theme parks when you target your young audience is there's usually like a little kids section, but teenagers do not want to go in the kids section. That's like the
Sure.
uncool section, and that's just the tiny little rides for the little kids. I'm too cool, and not even teenagers. Like once you kind of reach, I'd say like the tween stage or get into double digits, you're 10, you're like, I'm too cool for the little rides. I want to ride the big coasters. I want to go on the fun dark
Hmm.
rides that really challenge me. And so that was like finding that perfect balance is exactly
Sure.
what we were challenged with at Sally. So when PortAventura came to us, that's exactly what they challenged us with is like, how can you create an attraction that's going to hit all these demographics, but still meet the brand requirements of Sesame Workshop?
Sure. Yeah. Fascinating challenges.
Yeah.
And I think we were talking off camera before about, um, there's training for the design and the creative aspects of this work. There's training for the construction and the fabrication part. There's training for the management part. And if I got it right in my head, and correct me if I'm wrong, you for that project sat at sort of the project management place. So there were
Yeah.
other designers figuring out how to solve these problems.
Yes.
And then there were other fabricators and subcontractors doing the construction work, but you were managing the flow of it,
Yeah.
even when they were discovering these challenges that maybe they hadn't thought of. Is that
Correct.
is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a absolutely fair statement. So, I call I call project management problem management because that's really the majority of the job. So anybody who's interested in project management, you need to be a creative problem solver. You need to be somebody who's really good at working with others, diverse groups of people.
Sure.
Um, and because the majority of the time, things don't go perfect. Anybody
Right.
who thinks that once they make a schedule, everybody has to stick to that schedule. If any deviations happen, then it's a failure. You'll never make it in project management because it's about having this flexibility. It's about understanding the importance of what needs to happen when it needs to happen, understanding how certain aspects are intertwined, and those are your critical paths on a project. If one thing slides, it pushes all of these things. And then how do you make
Hmm.
up that time without negatively impacting the rest of your team? And it's a dance, and it's not always easy, and it's not always fun. And the reality is this project had its fair share of challenges and struggles and problems on site during the installation. But the amazing part was everybody rallied together, and so much of that is also from the leadership at PortAventura. Luis, who's the head of their design development, he created a workspace where he's like, look, we're all in it together. Just be honest with me. Tell me what is really
Mm.
happening.
Sure.
Let's figure out what is needed at this moment. We have a problem. Let's not point fingers. Let's figure out who needs what to succeed, because
Yeah.
we all succeed and we all fail together. And that's just like the best leadership and the best example of project management as well. It's like having that mindset. And so understanding when things are going to have to be modified to make up for
Sure.
delays, or maybe somebody even finishes early. Sometimes that happens.
It
Sometimes
does
people come
happen.
in and it doesn't take as long as you thought. It's not as complicated, or everything was prepared when they got there. So they didn't
Mhm.
actually need the full 2.5 weeks slotted. They were able to get it done in 1.5 weeks because things were ready. A lot of times you pad the time because you have no idea what you're walking into.
Yeah. Yeah. It does happen. It's rare, but it does have. Those are golden days for a
Those are
project
golden days.
manager
Amen to
when you start to get ahead.
that.
And you're right. Like one of the things that I tell students in my project planning class is right from the beginning. I think it's Clausewitz, as a German general, who said, "No battle plan survives contact with the enemy." I said that is your motto for any time you're doing project management. You have a plan and recognize that it's going to go all to heck as soon as you would deploy it. But having a plan to respond to is better than not having one at all. Um, are you able to talk about one specific moment in that project that sort of stands out as when you sort of had to flex your project management skills the most to respond to, where something slipped or didn't happen on time, or there was a question that hadn't come up before that caused a pause?
Oh man. I mean, oof. trying to think of what all I'm allowed to technically talk about. Um,
Gotcha.
so, one of the challenges we had, which anybody who works internationally will have the same challenge, is work permits. So
Hmm.
to get all the work permits to work in another country, to take care of that, understanding what the rules are, understanding what is required to get people, trying to get it all done before you're scheduled to start working. Um, and as well as what do you do when you have to hire local labor that are not part of your team, managing those teams when the leaders of your team don't speak Spanish very well, dealing with that struggle of translations and trying to keep everybody focused on the task at hand. We had lots of struggles with getting the scenic done in the time we had allotted. It all worked out in the end. The scenic is amazing. It's just such a gorgeous space. You really feel like you are in the world of Sesame Street, and that's because of the incredible quality of work that went into creating those sets and scenery. But there were delays in getting the designs approved, which then delayed the production
Hmm.
of the scenic, which then rushed the production, which then caused delays on the install. And then what was anticipated to be a certain amount of time slid. So then it became a matter of project managing to give the ride manufacturer time to still test their vehicles and do everything they need to do within the ride space, while also giving the scenic team the time they need to get in there and finish up all the scenic elements or painting or touch-ups and props, all those things that need to be done but can't be done when you have vehicles cycling. So that's where then the project manager really has to step in and coordinate all that, decide whether double shifts need to be done to accomplish this, or whether it's more of just creating a schedule that everybody agrees on, that like from this time to this time, we're going to run vehicles. Then we're going to take a 3-hour break. You can come in and do your thing. Then we're going to run for one more hour, and then you can have the rest of the day. And so it's a dance. And whenever things start overlapping that previously were not planned out, everybody just has to they just have to work together. It's a team effort. So it's just my job to try to make sure everybody's in agreement, which is always a fun
Sure.
challenge.
I mean, there's something reassuring about the fact that it sounds like every theater production I've ever worked on ever, right?
Yeah,
Designs are a little bit late, and that causes a pinch here and a squish there, and then
yeah,
there's overlapping schedules, and someone's got to figure out how do we get everybody to work as efficiently as possible,
yeah.
bring in extra labor if we have to, and overlap what work we can.
Yeah.
It's interesting to know that that happens on a $3,000 summer stock set, and it happens on a multi-million-dollar themed ride. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Um, so we've got a lot of students who are watching this. We've got a lot of faculty from various universities who are watching this. And you mentioned a whole list of academic programs that you went through that
Yeah.
you studied at. Um, are there some things that you learned? Can you point out some things that you learned from maybe each of those degree programs that you lean on every day in the work that you're doing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as far as the everything I learned in my graphic design degree, that's been fundamental to causing, or not causing, giving presentations, creating presentations, being able to visually represent what I'm trying to explain to people. uh, I originally went into graphic design because I really was strong on illustration, so being able to continue to utilize those illustration skills again to visually represent what I'm trying to explain to people, that's been extremely helpful. And it also comes in handy when design is behind and they're like, all right, Logan, we need help with making these posters, making these graphics, making these design spec sheets that need to go out to production to keep us on schedule. So when I have the time, I can jump in and help the department in that way. With my photography MFA, so much of that has really impacted not just my my abilities as a project manager to photograph and to document everything on site. And again, tying my graphic design and photography degree, I'm able to create these very detailed reports that show and isolate all these different problems as well as great things that are happening on site. So everybody can sort of stay up to date on the situation when I'm away in another country working on a project for months. Also, being able to use that MFA in photography about learning how to teach, because so much of it was preparing you to be a professor, and then I became a professor. That was vital in what I do now. Being able to do this right now, just talking to people. As a professor, you talk to lots of people all day long. You interact with
Indeed.
a wide variety of people. I think waiting tables was also a huge one. So anybody who's waiting
Sure.
tables out there, service industry is so critical to developing those people skills. I know people undervalue how important it is, but really being able to turn on the dime and each table, sort of read the table, respond accordingly, always put the customer first, and then get things
Yeah.
done as quickly as possible, turn and burn, but always focusing on
Yeah.
quality customer service and quality product. So the teaching aspect was huge. My MBA, what that's really helped me with is the business side of things. So prior to this, I didn't take a single business class my entire life. Like it wasn't required out of the two art degrees that I have. It wasn't required to take a single business class. I took an economics math class, but never a business class. And so I was really lacking in that department. I was doing a good job, but I needed to learn more. And for my future, I want to be able to do more in the company. So I really need to get that MBA, understand more. And my particular focus and why I chose the entrepreneurship and family enterprise side is because I really wanted to learn specifics about intrapreneurship, which is, promoting entrepreneurship within a company. And so in our case, it's really focusing on like, what's the next big thing? We have all these talents. What can we make? What can we be offering as another either service or product to our clients? And especially because we have a lot of clients that have our top tier dark ride. What else can we offer them?
Sure.
They may say,
Yeah.
well, we already have your best dark ride, if you will, quote unquote best. What else are we going to get? We're not going to like downgrade to get one of your lower tier dark rides. And it's like, well, I mean, a dark ride's a dark ride. You go to Disney World and you'll see there's no shortage of dark rides and they're all great, but
Right.
we understand their case. And so like what other products can we offer that are a complement to that are not the traditional dark ride? So that's been a big focus. And on the family enterprise side, we are a family-owned company. So understanding what makes a family-owned company unique versus either just a traditional public-owned company or private-owned company. So
Mm.
understanding that and what truly makes family unique. And in our industry, so many of the companies and the parks are
Yeah.
family-owned and operated. So understanding that just adds more sort of knowledge that I have, that I'm prepared when I talk with different people. So it was just all part of that preparing for the next phase of life, whatever that may be.
No, that makes sense. And there's a follow-up that I want to ask, but I also want to acknowledge that we're at about 40 minutes past, and there are a lot of you in the room. If we can start taking questions from you all, if you have them, just start typing them up in the Q&A, and we'll get to them as they come up. In the meantime, I can't help but notice that there wasn't a theater degree in any of what you studied. There wasn't a themed entertainment degree. There wasn't a
Nope.
themed entertainment design or theater
Yep.
technology or engineering degree. And I was actually in a meeting yesterday with a prospective undergraduate student who's like, I want to be an Imagineer. That's my thing. I want to be an Imagineer. And I think the theater engineering concentration at Purdue can help me do that. I'm not going to say that it can or can't. This is not a sales pitch for Purdue right now, but that's an interesting question, right? Like, can any one degree really prepare you for anything, right? And I guess that's and it's a tension that we face as faculty. Like, how deep do I need to teach you in 4 years at an undergrad degree? Or how broad do I need to get? And what is the best balance of those? I don't know if you want to respond to that, or if you have thoughts about that, both from your own experience and from seeing early career professionals.
It's such a tricky question. There's so many factors that go into the hiring of anyone. Like, if you think about it from a theater standpoint, when you're training an actor, you're training them to act, you're training them to be prepared to go to these auditions, but ultimately the casting director already has in their mind certain things they're looking for. And no matter how good of a performance you give, sometimes you didn't check all the boxes. You may have come in and you already didn't get the job just because of the way you looked based off of the way the role was designed. So, there's a lot of factors that go into that, in that specifically to acting and theater, but it's kind of the same thing in our industry. When you're applying for a job, you obviously look at the roles and responsibilities. You try to see, do I check all these? But even if you check all these, there's still a lot of X factors. If we look at how I got my job, I should not be in this job on paper. I had to interview and interview and interview and convince them that I was the right fit because, as you mentioned, like, I don't have a background in engineering. I don't have a background in audio video. I don't have a background in theater. I didn't come from any of the traditional sort of themed entertainment fields. I don't have any production experience, which we were talking about before this started. But what I did have was I had experience managing, I had experience teaching, working with lots of people, working with diverse students. I was a program coordinator at the Art Institute of Jacksonville before it closed. That had me running 4 different departments, handling the schedules for all the faculty, as well as every one of the students who were enrolled at that school, and making sure that everything that needed to be done was getting done on time and on budget. And so those experiences and my background in an MFA and my background in a BFA were really the X factors that separated me from anybody else who applied. And I didn't also come in with, I didn't have a big construction management background. I didn't know anything about it, but that was stuff that I told them, like, if you give me the opportunity, I guarantee you I can learn it. Like, these are all the things I have to offer that are not part of the job, but these few things I'm missing, I guarantee you I can do it. Like, I got straight A's in my MFA. I guarantee you I can figure this out. Like, not to sound like braggy or anything, but no, it's like, it's just proving that to them, is it's like, I can learn. If you give me the chance, I can learn. And my passion as well, my passion about the industry, about what they're doing here at Sally, the animatronics and the dark rides, like, understanding all that even before I came into the interview was a big step up as well. And then ultimately they said it was a pleasure. We're going to interview more people. And I was like, I totally understand. And a few months went by, and then they called me back up and they're like, come back in for another interview. And I did. And
Wow.
it worked out in their favor. It worked out in my favor
In
as
their
well.
favor.
So 9 years with
So,
Sally, and worked on multiple THEA award-winning attractions, and it's been a whirlwind, and it's nowhere near the end. So I got a lot more life left in me.
there you go. Yeah. One of the things that sort of in a through line in what you just said that I have always thought is important as an educator, is that part of what I want to make sure students leave Purdue with in terms of skills is the ability to look at what they do well and to be really honest in assessing their own skill set and being able to communicate that, and being the sort of corollary of that is once you know what you know and know what you don't know and can be really honest about that, you can figure out how to learn the things you don't know. Which I think that's kind of what I heard you saying, right? Is you were
Yeah.
able to go in the interview and say, these are the skills I have. These are the things that I've been able to learn along the way. And that prepares me for being able to learn this, that, or the other thing. So interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
I think too, I just to sort of reiterate too is like you got to take a chance, and you got like the most important thing that I think every student needs to know is you have to sell yourself. If like nobody else is going to sell you. When you go out, you got to hustle. You've got to put the best version of you forward. You really got to sell yourself. If you come to an interview, dress appropriately. Like when you come to an
huh,
interview, be ready to talk professionally, stay calm, avoid saying like, really come prepared to have a good interview. And like you mentioned, being honest, not lying. Don't lie and say you know how to do all these things. Don't say you're fluent in Spanish just because you've been doing Duolingo for 2 years. Like I've tried that. It doesn't work. Not the lying about it part, but I've done the Duolingo for multiple years and I'm still not fluent. Like,
right.
it's just be careful how you're selling yourself. Sell yourself as authentically as possible. Be the real you. Because that's the other thing is like you don't want to be a totally fake version of yourself when you come in. You want to be the best version of yourself, just the nice, cleaned up, professional version of yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got some time left. I'm still watching. I'm surprised that there are no questions. There's so many people here attending and nobody's thrown any questions up. We must be doing a really good job just talking about all the important stuff. Um, is there one takeaway or thing that you learned from the Sesame Street project at PortAventura that you have taken into other projects? One key moment that was sort of like eye-opening, or you were sort of surprised that you were able to figure out a path through or something, and that you carried forward. Is there something like that you can share with us?
My biggest takeaway from that project was there are certain projects you do and they're a job. And when you're done, you don't have the warm and fuzzies. You accomplish the task. You're like, we did it. We checked all the boxes. I'm happy. I'm ready to go home. Um, but with that particular project, it even though times were stressful, there was such a great camaraderie amongst everybody on site. The location, I mean, PortAventura World, if you've never been, is such a great park, an amazing park, beautiful area. You can literally walk to the beach from the park. I mean, it's just gorgeous and amazing. And it's such a wonderful place, and wonderful people are just so welcoming. And that all plays a part in the project. Also, Sesame Workshop. I mean, you want to talk about the nicest people in the world. Sesame Workshop, everybody that we worked with there, from Kip Rathke with our creative director, he was amazing, to Risa and Sal and Stuart. I mean, everybody there was just so nice. And it makes a huge difference when they love and care their product so much, and then they entrust in you, and you finally have that product that in the end it encapsulates the exact feel you were going for. It's hard to have a ride that captures a lot of feelings. So it's easy to say, interactive 4D, and check all, there's scents in here. So you smell cookies, things like that
Sure.
are easy to check off and to say, these are all the things we did. But the feeling of that ride and the feeling it left me with. And I think too, with having a son of that age at that time, it just made it that much more meaningful for me. So the friendships that came from that project and the friendships that were further developed during that project are really, I mean, that can never be taken away from me. And that ultimately is really the sense of love and pride for this attraction, and all the great relationships developed from it is what I sort of value the most from the whole experience.
That's kind of amazing to hear. And I heard that even when you were talking about Luis from PortAventura, right? And
Oh boy.
like you were describing him, and I was like,
He's
that's the boss I
awesome.
want to work for. Why can't I work for that guy all the time?
Yeah.
And it reminds me of I got a chance to do a show. There's always, for theater folks like me, there's always the hope to do that one show with like all your best friends who are artists from different
Yeah.
disciplines, right? And you if you're lucky, you get to do that once, and it's like
Yeah.
this great experience. But it sounds like that's kind of what you had on this project, and
Well,
that's kind of
it's
amazing.
it's almost even more lucky in the sense where you don't work with your friends. These are, in many cases, strangers that you may have never worked with before, but by the end of the project, you're all
Mhm.
really close. And so
Yeah.
much so that you're like, let's do this again. When can we do this again? And that's what eventually led to us working on the Uncharted Dark Coaster at PortAventura, which opened last year. So,
Wow.
and it's
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
you want to work with the people you know and trust.
sure. I'm gonna call out to Rachel, who's sort of running the Q&A there behind the screen that I'm looking at. Can you move the Q&A panel just a little bit to the left? Some of the words are not showing for me, and I can't read them out. We've got a couple of things here. So Karina says, no questions. I'm just enjoying listening. I find your career fascinating. The experiences you talk about are so cool, and you guys have given us a ton of insight and advice already. So kudos to you.
Thank
You've
you.
got a great career. That's awesome. Stevens writes, how does the process differ working on an established IP like Sesame Street compared to some theming that you develop in-house? That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
And we should have asked it 20 minutes ago because we've got 10 minutes left. But in a couple of minutes or less, can you answer that question?
Well, the main thing is it's all about making sure that it meets brand. With this particular attraction, again, one of the things that was so great about it was the partnership with Sesame Workshop, where they literally sent us detailed drawings of how their sets were built in New York. And then we had to modify those drawings to work within the space that we had. And, we also worked with BMP on the early designs for this, and they had just come off working on the Sesame Street land at SeaWorld. So they were already very familiar with the sort of sets. To add to that, we had a bunch of sets that had never been built before. There was no practical set, if you will, for the exterior of Count's Castle. There were all these visual references from the show. And again, Kip helped us to define what that look would be. Same thing with as we fly through Count's Castle. Count's Castle has only ever really been sort of represented as kind of like a flat space where, the Muppets are in front and the background's just flat. Where here we travel through. So using those references to build out the world. And the same thing with Oscar's trash can. When you dive down into Oscar's trash can and you're inside his can. And that was one of those where we were going after references from a movie that involved going into sort of Grouchland, but they were like, no, 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 no. That is non-canon. That's like we're not using that as
Oh,
reference. We're gonna work with you to bring together Oscar's Trash Can Land. And so that was something that we got to develop in cooperation and collaboration with Sesame Workshop and PortAventura. But going back to your question, if this was a non-IP ride, we just do what we want. That's the best thing about, like, for instance, when we design our Ghost Blasters, our original IP, all of our Ghost Blasters attractions are completely built however we want them to be for the space. And then at that point, the only person we need approval from is the client, because it is still a collaboration between us and the client, even if there's not an IP holder involved.
hmm.
So
Sure.
we still got to get the client's approval.
There's a whole conversation to be had there about stakeholders and what stake they have in the project and how much
Yeah.
clout they have to
Yes.
enforce that. Sure. I hope that got to your question, Stephen. It sounded like it did, and there's some interesting stuff there too about. It sounds like for the Sesame Street project, you had opportunities to sort of strictly adhere to existing IP imagery, but then to sort of create something together that was new within that IP and that brand, which is great. Anonymous says, talking about these goals around really capturing a certain feeling for this ride. They want to know if there's ever been a project where you couldn't reach the objectives that had been set for yourself, whether your own objectives or somebody else's, and if so, how do you deal with that? And then they also say, just as an add-on, who's your favorite Muppet? So we'll do the first part, and then we'll end on the what's your favorite Muppet. So how do you deal with it when you can't reach or achieve the goals you had set for a project?
It's really, I mean, that's a tough one because sometimes it's strictly personal. Sometimes it's literally at the feeling, how do I feel at the end of this ride? Do I feel accomplished? Am I happy with the final product? You know, because sometimes even if the guests are coming off and they're thrilled and they're just having the best time, that helps. That helps to influence how you feel about it. But there are some instances where if I would have had more money, if I would have had more time,
Mhm.
I could have made this better. And
Mm.
sometimes that happens, but honestly, like, why dwell on that? You don't want to dwell on that. You don't want to dwell on the what ifs. It's done. Be happy that it's done. Celebrate. Uh, it's one of those things where it's tougher when you get a lot of negative guest feedback, which thankfully I've never been part of a project with a lot of negative guest feedback, but I imagine everybody has the ability to give their opinion online, and you know, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Some of our
Sure.
newer employees, sometimes when they go into the comments after a post has been made or somebody's talked about one of our rides and they start reading the comments, and they're not always nice. Even if you do a perfect attraction, they're not always going to be nice comments, and you have to be able to filter that out. But on controlling your own emotions is it's hard. It's easier said than done. And there's certainly
Sure.
been projects where I've been like, oh, I know we could have done this better, or we could have done this thing better. But ultimately, is the client happy? Yes. Did I meet my objectives as a project manager? Yes. Are the guests happy? Yes. So therefore, I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. There's a first of all, number one rule of the internet: don't read the comments. Right? Like,
Yes,
don't do that to
exactly.
yourself
Just don't
ever.
do it.
But there's a lesson that we try to teach the technical direction and project management students at Purdue. The phrase we use is, "We are not the art police." Right? Like, if the client or the designer or the director is thrilled with what we've created, if it's achieved their goals in some ways, that's our most important job.
Yeah.
Even if we look at it and go, well, that's not historically accurate, or I wouldn't have used that, I hate purple, or whatever. If the clients that we're trying to work with are happy, then we've done our job, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Okay, we've
historical
got a couple of
person's
minutes
not going to
left.
come
So
back and hire you.
what's that?
I said the historical person will not come back and hire you. The client
Right.
will if they have a good experience working with you.
Yeah, the color purple is not going to hire me ever,
Yeah,
but the client
yeah.
will.
And favorite
So
Muppet, Big Bird.
yeah, favorite Muppet,
I'm 6'7", so yeah, I feel for Big Bird. I'm right there with him on the
Big
high.
Bird. Okay. All right. I always was really fond of Snuffleupagus when I
There
was
you
a
go.
kid, Big Bird's imaginary friend. I'm
Cookie
sure that
Monster is my
somebody will
second
unpack in
favorite.
the comments something about that and my psychology, but we'll let that go. I did want to be sure to ask you before we wrapped up, Logan. You and I first met about a year ago, I think, at IAPA in
Mhm.
Orlando. I'll
Yeah.
be there again. Are we going to get a chance to bump into each other?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it'll happen. I'll be there Monday through Thursday, so definitely.
Okay. And I think I heard you were even sitting on some panels.
Yeah, so I will be moderating two panels on the Monday. So here's the nice part about the Monday is that if you come, you've got all day education on Monday and it doesn't impact your trade show experience at all. You can still, because the trade show floor opens on Tuesday. So if you come out on Monday, there's two panels I'm moderating. One of them is at 8:30. I know, brutal time, but
Ah,
it's called It's All Fun and Games, Exploring Gamification in Parks and Attractions. And if you are even slightly interested in gamification, you're gonna want to attend this. I mean, we're going deep on the psychology of gamification and using real world examples of how gamification is being used, both at a low cost and a high cost within parks, FEC, well, not FECs, but like museums, cruise ships. So you're going to want to check it out. And then later in the afternoon at 2:30 on Monday, November 18th, I'll be moderating Exploring Current Trends, Family Experiences. And so this whole panel is really focused on the families, as we've been talking about with the Sesame
sure.
Street Mission ride, focusing on family, the sort of current trends that are happening with more and more of these coasters, for instance, that are being added to lots of parks. They're
Mhm.
technically family coasters because they're ones where they're allowing younger audiences, shorter audiences to ride, but still having a thrill value, maybe not of an Iron Gwazi or a Velocicoaster, but an intensity level that really pushes what kids can handle, but is still within that really fun family demographic. So
Sure.
we'll be talking about that and all these different parks and how they're managing that balance within their parks.
Those both sound fantastic. I'm glad I haven't
That'd
bought
be
my
great.
flights yet, so I'm going to make sure that I can get there and be there for the 8:30 a.m. on Monday, because I'm a game player and I love that whole concept.
Awesome.
And if you're going, you should make time to see these panels because
Yes.
clearly Logan's a great speaker and has lots of things to share. So um, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. And I just want to share some of the things that are coming up. Our next First Friday is Friday, November 1st. The registration link will be up for that probably early next week. We're going to meet with Ron Martin to talk about innovation and technology for storytelling. Ron Martin, if you don't know him, you should know him. He brings over 40 years of technology leadership to the entertainment industry and the television, film, and theme park sectors. He was the Vice President of Engineering for Universal Studios Hollywood, Chief Technology Officer for Deluxe Digital Studios, and Vice President and Director of Panasonic Hollywood Lab, a division of Panasonic Research and Development Corporation of America. He's worked on so many projects that you would recognize. I'm not going to spoil them. He's got great stories. He's just a great guy to listen to. So please join us for that. And then Friday, December 6th, we'll have Josh Groh, who is Senior Vice President of Studio Core Technology at Sphere Entertainment Company. If you don't know what that is, that's the giant spherical performance space in Las Vegas. He oversees infrastructure that supports the core technology functions. He's going to join us and talk about what that job is like now that they've been open for just a little over a year now, I think. So join us for those. Watch for more about that on our social media and our website. Thank you again. Thank you, Logan. This was fantastic.
My pleasure. Thank
And
you all.
we will see you all soon. I think